Have you ever noticed how comforting it feels when everyone around you agrees with you? You speak your mind, and they nod. You express a belief, and it's reflected right back at you. On the surface, it feels safe. But what if I told you this safety is a trap, one of the deadliest mental traps you could inhabit? Carl Jung recognized it decades ago. He called it the echo chamber, a psychological environment where your thoughts, fears, and biases are constantly mirrored back until they feel like absolute truth. Most people never realize that this constant reinforcement quietly rewires their brain. You think you're sharpening your perspective, staying informed, or staying connected. In reality, your critical thinking muscles are atrophying like limbs left unused for years. When your mind is never challenged, neural pathways that support curiosity, doubt, and reasoning weaken. You stop questioning because questioning feels like betrayal, and eventually, your worldview becomes rigid, fragile, and terrified of anything different. The echo chamber doesn't just stop growth, it actively shrinks your mind. Every conversation becomes predictable. Different opinions feel threatening. You stop asking, "Could I be wrong?" You only seek affirmation, and the danger here is subtle. It isn't dramatic, but the damage is profound. Dr. Matthew Lieberman's research at UCLA shows that when group thinking dominates individual thought, the brain's ability to engage in critical reasoning diminishes over time. Jung saw this in his patients. Hours spent in political gatherings, social clubs, or online spaces where every voice confirmed pre-existing biases made them anxious, fearful, and dependent on group approval for psychological safety. And here's the cruel twist: the echo chamber feels like belonging. It feels comfortable. It's seductive because it shields you from disagreement, discomfort, and the uncertainty of reality. But comfort is exactly what makes it dangerous. The warning signs are clear once you know where to look. If you can predict what anyone around you will say on any topic, if opposing views trigger personal offense rather than intellectual curiosity, if your conversations merely reinforce your own thinking instead of challenging it, then you're likely trapped. But the good news is, awareness is the first step toward liberation. Recognizing the echo chamber allows you to start seeking voices that challenge you kindly, ideas that provoke thought rather than conformity, and spaces where disagreement doesn't feel like betrayal. Escaping this trap doesn't require abandoning friends, communities, or beliefs entirely. It's about expanding your mental environment, embracing diversity of thought, and daring to tolerate discomfort in the pursuit of clarity. When you break free, something remarkable happens. Your mind stretches, critical thinking returns, curiosity awakens. You become resilient against manipulation, group pressure, and automatic bias. The echo chamber that once drained your energy and narrowed your perception becomes a story you tell about a past self, someone you grew beyond. And once you've stepped outside, you'll notice the freedom it brings. Conversations become exploration rather than affirmation. Differences become opportunities rather than threats. You start seeing the world not through the reflection of your own mind, but as it actually is. This is the power of escaping the echo chamber. It's not just mental liberation, it's the first step toward reclaiming your psychological sovereignty, the first step toward becoming the master of your own mind. Have you ever achieved something significant, only to feel hollow the moment you see someone else doing it better, faster, or bigger? That's the trap of the comparison arena, one of the most insidious psychological environments Jung identified. It looks innocent, sometimes even motivational, but lurking beneath its surface is a slow, relentless erosion of your self-worth. Carl Jung observed patients who were already fragile from echo chamber, thinking falling into this next trap. Hours spent comparing achievements, status, relationships, or possessions rewired their brains to search relentlessly for inadequacy rather than growth. Every success became meaningless unless measured against someone else's victory. And it's not just a feeling. Modern neuroscience confirms what Jung suspected decades ago. Dr. Rachel Callagher's research at the University of the West of England shows that constant comparison can literally shrink the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making, self-regulation, and confidence. The mechanism is subtle but powerful. Your mind enters what Jung called the inflation-deflation cycle. When you feel superior, it's fleeting pride. When you feel inferior, it's crushing inadequacy. Rarely do you experience the pure state of simply being yourself. It's addictive because your brain gets trained to measure everything externally, creating a feedback loop that hijacks intrinsic motivation. The warning signs are everywhere. Other people's success triggers envy, self-doubt, or irritation. You achieve goals, but the joy is fleeting, replaced immediately by comparison. Decisions are made based on how they will look to others rather than how they feel to you. Happiness becomes dependent on relative status, not personal fulfillment. Jung's patient confessed, "I got promoted at work, but all I could think about was my friend who became CEO faster. My achievement felt meaningless because it wasn't the biggest in the room." That simple statement reveals the core danger. Your internal compass becomes skewed, your values outsourced to the metric of other people's lives. Escaping the comparison arena begins with awareness. You must consciously recognize when you are measuring yourself against others. This isn't just an intellectual exercise, it's emotional vigilance. Every time you feel envy or inadequacy, pause. Ask yourself, is this about my own growth or someone else's? Then, reclaim your intrinsic metrics. Set goals aligned with your values, passions, and curiosity. Learn to celebrate achievements for their own sake, not for how they stack up. Seek inspiration, not validation. Surround yourself with people who encourage self-reflection and collaboration rather than competition and judgment. When you practice this consistently, the arena loses its power. Your mind stops being hijacked by comparison, and instead, you start to measure life by your own standards. Decisions become authentic. Confidence grows. Joy returns. You begin to experience life not as a series of rankings, but as a canvas for your unique expression. Jung's insight is profound. Escaping the comparison arena doesn't just restore happiness, it restores autonomy over your inner world. You stop being a spectator in your own life and start being the artist, shaping your reality according to your values rather than the shadow of someone else's success. Have you ever left work, a social event, or a family gathering utterly exhausted, even though nothing particularly stressful happened? That's the silent toll of the performance theater, one of the most insidious psychological environments Carl Jung uncovered. This is the place where your authenticity is punished, and only the mask you wear receives reward. The performance theater doesn't shout its dangers, it whispers them, lulling you into a slow erasure of your true self. Jung observed patients who spent decades performing for approval. They laughed at jokes that weren't funny, agreed with ideas they opposed, and hid thoughts or feelings that didn't fit the expected mold. Each small compromise seemed harmless at first, but gradually, layer by layer, it built a psychological prison. Jung called this process persona identification. The mask becomes your only recognizable identity. Over time, the patient even forgot who he was beneath the performance. Modern psychology confirms the damage. Dr. Christine Neff's research on self-compassion shows that chronic performance for others strengthens your inner critic, creating a relentless internal voice that judges, doubts, and punishes authenticity. The warning signs are subtle but unmistakable once you know what to look for. You feel drained after social interactions instead of energized. You agree with things you secretly reject. Expressing opinions that might be unpopular triggers fear. Your true thoughts and emotions feel dangerous or inappropriate, like a part of you must remain hidden for survival. Jung's patient described it perfectly. I became so good at being what others wanted that I forgot what I wanted, and when I tried to remember, there was nothing there. That emptiness is the signature of the performance theater. It doesn't just hide your true self, it erases it gradually until your life becomes a series of adaptations, approvals, and compromises. Escaping this trap begins with recognition. You must see where performance dominates your life and understand that approval-seeking, though tempting, comes at a psychological cost. Begin reclaiming authenticity by making small choices aligned with your true thoughts and feelings. Speak honestly in low-risk situations. Express minor preferences openly. Notice the relief and power that arises when you stop performing for others. Surround yourself with people who value sincerity over conformity, who respect curiosity, diversity, and vulnerability. As you practice, the mask loses its power, and your authentic self begins to emerge. This is not instant liberation. Persona identification is deeply ingrained, but with consistent awareness and courage, the performance theater can be dismantled. Jung observed that once patients reclaimed authenticity, their energy returned, their relationships became more meaningful, and they began making choices grounded in truth rather than expectation. The performance theater teaches a powerful lesson. Conformity offers temporary comfort, but only authenticity delivers lasting strength, clarity, and freedom. Escaping it is the act of reclaiming yourself, step by step, decision by decision, until the life you lead reflects the person you truly are. Have you ever felt alone, even in a crowd, or empty, despite having everything you thought you wanted? That's the mark of the silent suffering space, one of the most treacherous psychological environments Carl Jung uncovered. It is the place where emotional needs are ignored, buried beneath the illusion of stability, and masked by an outward appearance of normalcy. Jung encountered countless patients who seemed to have perfect families, stable jobs, and social harmony, yet carried profound inner emptiness. In these environments, expressing pain is seen as weakness, and voicing needs is considered selfish. Over time, emotional starvation takes hold. The patient Jung treated described it perfectly. We never fought, but we never really talked. I learned that having needs was selfish, and expressing pain was weakness. Emotional needs don't vanish when ignored. They fester, unconsciously shaping thought, behavior, and perception. Modern attachment research supports this. Dr. Sue Johnson's studies demonstrate that chronic suppression of emotional needs dysregulates the nervous system, leaving the body in persistent stress and the mind anxious, restless, and empty. The danger of the silent suffering space is its deceptive normality. Outward appearances are calm, the chaos lies beneath. You may function perfectly in daily life, yet feel inexplicable tension, dissatisfaction, or a gnawing loneliness. Warning signs are subtle. You feel isolated even around loved ones, learn to cope with pain instead of healing it, hesitate to ask for support, and perceive vulnerability as dangerous. Jung's patient confessed that asking for help felt selfish, though internally he was starving for connection. Escaping this trap begins with awareness. You must recognize where emotional neglect has become habitual. Then comes courage, the courage to express needs, set boundaries, and allow yourself to feel without judgment. Healing requires cultivating safe spaces for honesty, whether with trusted friends, partners, or therapists. Over time, emotional regulation returns, anxiety diminishes, and inner emptiness begins to fill with authentic feeling. Jung observed that patients who emerged from silent suffering didn't just feel better, they reclaimed themselves. They became capable of meaningful intimacy, genuine joy, and assertive self-expression. Relationships transformed because they no longer unconsciously conform to patterns of avoidance and neglect. The silent suffering space teaches a profound lesson. Comfort without emotional truth is a prison. Safety is not worth the cost of your inner life. Liberation demands attentiveness to your emotional world, the bravery to speak, and the patience to nurture what has long been ignored. By embracing your feelings instead of suppressing them, you reclaim your humanity. Jung believed that recognizing and addressing silent suffering is not merely self-care. It is a decisive act of psychological freedom, a step toward the life you were always meant to inhabit, grounded in authenticity, connection, and inner peace. Have you ever felt like your mind is always racing, filled with a relentless stream of thoughts, notifications, news, and obligations? That's the chaos storm, one of the most destructive psychological environments Carl Jung identified. Unlike other traps that isolate or suppress, the chaos storm overwhelms, drowning out your inner voice until you can no longer hear yourself think. Jung observed patients who filled every moment of silence with activity, fearful of stillness because it forced them to confront unresolved emotions, difficult decisions, and parts of themselves they had been avoiding. This environment is seductive because it feels productive. Newspapers, social media, work tasks, conversations, and entertainment provide a constant flow of stimulation, making avoidance almost invisible. But the cost is profound. Dr. Adam Gazelli's research at UCSF demonstrates that chronic mental stimulation impairs the prefrontal cortex, disrupting decision-making, focus, and emotional integration. The brain becomes overloaded, making impulsive choices to reduce cognitive load rather than engage thoughtfully with reality. Jung called this psychic fragmentation. The patient he treated confessed, "I stay busy because when I stop, all the things I'm avoiding catch up with me, but I'm exhausted from running." The chaos storm teaches your nervous system to crave distraction. Quiet moments trigger anxiety because your mind no longer knows how to self-regulate. Warning signs include the inability to sit still, constantly checking devices, feeling busy but unproductive, and consuming information without understanding or meaning. Opinions multiply without depth, and rest feels threatening. Escaping the chaos storm requires conscious intervention. You must deliberately reclaim silence, solitude, and mental space. Begin small 10 minutes of intentional stillness, journaling, or reflection, and gradually extend these periods. Notice discomfort without judgment. This is your mind reconnecting with itself. As you practice, clarity returns. Thoughts integrate, priorities emerge, and you regain access to your intuition. Jung observed that patients who survived the chaos storm experienced profound transformation. Decision-making improved, creativity returned, and inner wisdom flourished. The storm's addictive pull weakened as awareness grew, and silence became a space of insight rather than fear. The chaos storm is a master teacher. It reveals how easily our minds can be hijacked by constant input, and how critical stillness is for authentic growth. Liberation isn't achieved by productivity hacks or distraction management alone. It requires a deliberate reorientation towards self-awareness. By resisting the chaos storm, you reclaim your inner voice, regain psychological sovereignty, and learn to navigate life with focus, clarity, and calm. Jung understood that true mental freedom is never found in noise. It is cultivated in the still spaces of your mind, where reflection, understanding, and wisdom arise. Only by weathering the storm can you reconnect with the person you were meant to become, free from distraction and fully aligned with your inner truth. Have you ever realized that the hardest battles you fight aren't with the outside world, but with yourself? That's the combined danger of the self-abandonment chamber and the shadow basement, two of the most devastating psychological environments Carl Jung identified. The self-abandonment chamber begins quietly. You start saying yes when everything inside screams no, staying in relationships, jobs, or routines that drain you, because the easier path seems safer. Over time, repeated compromises disconnect you from your instincts, desires, and truth. Jung observed patients who reached the point where they no longer recognized their own needs. One patient admitted, "I felt like I was living someone else's life. I couldn't remember the last time I made a decision based on what I actually wanted." Modern trauma research confirms that chronic self-abandonment erodes bodily awareness, disconnecting you from the wisdom of your own emotions and intuition. But the danger does not stop there. Deep within the psyche lies the shadow basement, a repository of fears, shame, and disowned parts of ourselves. Avoiding these aspects feels safe, but in truth, the shadow grows stronger in the darkness, influencing behavior in subtle but powerful ways. Self-sabotage, sudden anger, recurring patterns, or irrational fears. Jung called this shadow possession. The very parts of yourself you reject start controlling your life unconsciously. The patient he treated found himself repeating the worst behaviors of his father, unaware until the consequences manifested. The warning signs are unmistakable. Recurring emotional triggers that seem irrational, repeated mistakes despite knowing better, harsh judgment of others for traits you secretly fear in yourself, or persistent anxiety and depression without obvious cause. Escaping these twin traps requires profound courage. Step 1 is conscious recognition. Acknowledge where you've ignored your needs and where your shadow exerts influence. Step 2 is deliberate reintegration, making choices aligned with your authentic self and confronting hidden parts of your psyche through journaling, therapy, or deep self-reflection. As Jung observed, the transformation is extraordinary. The energy once lost to fear, self-betrayal, and avoidance becomes a source of insight, compassion, and creativity. Anger can become advocacy, shame can transform into empathy, and buried strengths can emerge as courage and purpose. Liberation here is not simply avoidance, it is integration. By facing the shadow and reclaiming your neglected self, you stop recreating toxic patterns unconsciously, reclaim autonomy, and achieve psychological sovereignty. The self-abandonment chamber and shadow basement teach the ultimate truth. Running from discomfort, denying your truth, or hiding from inner realities may feel protective, but the cost is catastrophic. Facing them demands bravery, honesty, and persistence. Yet when you do, the power unlocked is immense. Jung's insight was clear. Psychological freedom is born not from avoidance, but from courageously embracing your inner truth. When you step into your shadow and reclaim your authenticity, you emerge whole, empowered, and unstoppable, finally, the master of your own mind and life.